So let me just, I'll take about a half hour of your time, and I wish I was taking less because I really enjoyed what I've started to hear already, Dan, so you're in for a real treat today. So just a little bit about my background so you can see where I come from. I've been a hardcore agronomist, leading research teams around the world. I'm currently with Cotton Incorporated, but spent a lot of time in that part of the world. And you recognize that? What part of China that would be? No. That's Xinjiang. That's the main cotton area, and these are some of my former employees with me. But I've worked around the world in and out of industry. So extension, seed industry, back in public sector service, so a wide variety. But currently I'm working for Cotton Incorporated. And the reason this is important because the topic that you're talking about is a small component of decision making. I loved your comment, or it was Dan's comment this morning, I think it was yours, that decisions are what we're here to talk about today, in farmers making decisions. So Cotton Incorporated, we're the research and promotion arm of the cotton industry. So promotion is a big chunk of what we do. It's not what I do. I do the ag research part, but it helps give you a context that what you're doing has to drop into a promotion or a marketing arm. So I just pulled two slides from our marketing team that really illustrate some of the concepts that I'll move out of the way here. Oh, there's a clicker. Is this clicker?
Yeah.
Great, so I can get out of your way.
The middle button is the pointer, and then forward and back.
Great, thank you. So this is statistics from a marketing standpoint. There's a concept, a product concept, moisture management, followed with 3 bullet points, 3 replications. So that's the level of statistics that they use for that level of customers. Moisture management, critical for athleisure, a big market that cotton has suffered market share gain. And then the 3 benefits, which would be the 3 replications for the consumer listed right below it. Some other examples of product concept followed with benefits. So that's the level of the LSD or p-value or Gaussian distribution that the marketing people are using for customers. So take-home message of the level of statistics really has to fit what you're doing, the customer that you're working with. Just another example from them of not only do you have to understand the level of sophistication or the needs of that consumer from a statistical or data standpoint, but also you have to understand how you're going to reach them. Where are they interested in receiving information, or where are they even willing to receive information? And this is our latest, we do massive amounts of consumer surveys, and we find that customers want to see it on a hang tag. They love having that immediacy of looking at a product and reading about it right at that point. That point of sale is critical. Page products, even though a lot of the customers are millennials, we're just seeing that not nearly as important as having data rich or information rich. By data for them, that's a few sentences right there on the point of sale. So let's go into ag, and I'm going to cover 4 different components. You don't need to know what the other ones are, but the top one is the one that Dan and I worked out together. He's already left the room, so I can blame him if it's confusing. And one of the things that I do as the head of research for a non-for-profit checkoff, the cotton checkoff, is I collaborate with my counterparts in corn, soy, wheat, and sorghum. We meet 3 times a year. These are all the heads of research for those commodity checkoffs. It's about 250 million acres of U.S. acres that funnel funds into our organizations to do research and promotion. We get together and talk about collaboration things going on. So we had our meeting 2 weeks ago, and I asked them all a series of questions. Not all of them responded properly, but we have results that represent a spectrum of crops that I'd like to share with you first and foremost. And so we'll go through 4 slides that have this type of format with the question that I asked them at the front. And now Disclosure, I had to buy them a very nice dinner in D.C. before they would fill out the form. And the one person that missed the dinner, I got the results yesterday. So clearly the dinner was effective in getting results. A lot of tequila went into these numbers. So I think they're really legitimate numbers on that. So the first question we asked is, please rank the following recommendation sources with regards to influencing an early adopter's decision regarding a new technology. I thought this would be the kind of thing that would, since many of you are developing new technologies. And so these are ranked based on the average of all those commodities. And you can see the corn gentleman, even though he's undoubtedly the most intelligent person in the room when we get together, Rick Vierling, didn't read the question and just gave us one data point. But a lot of this really makes sense across. So the things that influence farmers, neighboring farmers, obviously what happens on a field across the fence, across the road, same weather, similar soils, similar constraints, financial constraints, that's really important. One that's moving up, and I'll show you some data later on, is the company technical representatives. Farmers are putting more and more credence in what company scientists who have good reputations are saying. You'll see the sales staff are way down at the bottom, but the technical rep is doing pretty good. Farmers consultants, always been a real positive. Obviously a lot of trust there. Extension specialists in there. Well-known consultant, not nearly as good. Obviously sales staff. Magazine articles. I'll show you some other data. That's really plummeting in terms of a way to reach growers. Web-based information didn't do too well here. It's coming up based on some other data I'll show you. So the second question I asked them is to please rank the statistical designs with regards to influencing an early adopter grower. And this was, for me, this was just absolutely straightforward. The top two, growers like to see large plot replicated or large plot strip trials. They're less confident in split fields, and part of the reason they know it's so easy to game the system now, you know what half of the field has a history of doing better than the other, and so putting, you know, a split field just doesn't carry as much credence as large plot strips. And I was thinking about Ronald's, yes, go ahead.
Why is sorghum the outlier there? It seems enjoyed.
Sorghum is an industry that is largely a default crop. The bulk of the sorghum in the U.S. is planted in the Southwest when the other crops fail. And the gentleman that heads this is a PhD from Texas Tech, and he's incredibly frustrated because sorghum growers, if the cotton crop fails or another crop fails, at the last minute they'll put sorghum in and they put virtually no inputs into it. So it's a very low input crop, and the growers really don't, it's not a driver in terms of their decision making process. And so I think we're seeing some real, I think if you step back 20 years ago, growers would have said split fields is the way to go. And so I think really with sorghum, the bulk of the sorghum acreage is in the Southwest, and they're really 20 years behind from the standpoint of technology adoption. It's a default crop. Good question. Yes.
Define large plot.
Well, yes.
Your large plot may not be the same.
Exactly. It depends on your harvest system. So from a cotton, you need to have it large enough that you can have a unit that you can measure. And the current cotton systems that for harvesting bring in about 3 to 4 bales. And so a large plot on this may be 2 to 10 acres on that. To Ronald's point on integrating the multiple factors, this is the way that growers integrate multiple factors. They know that there's going to be variability in the fertilizer content, in the weed pressure, and the way the insects move in from the edge, and the soil changes. And so instead of having this split, multifactorial study, they feel that these large plots accommodate some of that diversity of covariates.
It's the real world.
The real world, exactly. The next question that Dan and I asked them had to do about the statistical metrics. And again, these are early adopter growers. So these are not, the mean. These are the top 10% of the growers, which are the ones that are going to adopt new technologies first, and the ones that are the bell cows. Clearly, we have a bell cow phenomenon with growers here in the U.S. Surprisingly, LSD and CV, I personally was surprised that the CV did so well, but I think these elite growers are really understanding that's a simple, clear-cut metric of the quality of a trial, the quality of a replicated trial. Duncan's multiple range didn't appear anywhere at all, and so I think, again, sorghum, what's going on with sorghum? They say p-value. I think and this gentleman has a PhD in economics from Texas Tech, so he knows what a p-value is. I'm not sure what that means here. What level of statistics and evidence will be necessary to convince growers to try biological products on the farm? And here is some real commonality. We got some lengthy responses. These products will need performance. They just can't be substandard. They have to compete with existing synthetics. Growers won't be willing to invest if control is substandard or less. They're saying side-by-side comparisons on farm with means compared using some statistical measure will be sufficient. That was soybeans. Cotton. And for cotton, I had the number 2 person in my department who I'm going to hand the gavel off to here in a couple of years, do it. And he's an ag engineer, so it really reflects his thinking. High level of transparency, small plot university trials, and well-designed on-farm trials with spatial statistics. He was the only one that brought up that word. He says it's going to be hard to overcome snake oil perception. Corn, they will need more data in on-field. Wheat, performance, on-farm, large areas. Half planter measured by combine monitor. Farmers are skeptical on sorghum of biological products. Large-scale statistics will help convince. And the last question that we asked them had to do with the efficacy of biological products, because as you saw in the previous slide, there is some belief that biological products are going to be less efficacious because of the introduction of them 30 and 20 years ago, where we had some Bacillus subtilis treatments that growers had a hard time really seeing value on. So the question was, should product suppliers lower their performance thresholds for biological products to assure greater market options to synthetics? And I think this is really telling. No, no, no across the board with a yes for wheat. Let's look at in detail. Soybeans, I don't think it's appropriate to lower it if performance thresholds can't be met. Then it's doubtful these products will be accepted. Cotton was really insightful. Unless the only synthetic alternative is high risk for humans or the environment. You're going to see that's going to crop up in a subsequent slide. We believe that farmers are getting very sensitized to environmental impacts and very sensitized to health and personal risk of putting products on. Corn, again, this is the smartest guy in the room. He's being real honest. He doesn't know. Wheat is yes, and I'm not sure why wheat says that. They tend to use the absolute cheapest products, 2,4-D, minimal fertilizer input. Outside of the Pacific Northwest, they tend to be a low input. Value may be thin, so cost not covered. May need direct marketing model to reduce cost. And sorghum just said no, don't lower your thresholds.
I think the wheat probably, wheat compared to other community crops like corn, soybean, the wheat yield through the genetic change, genetic improvement is much less.
Absolutely, excellent point.
Corn every year get corn genetic enhancement per year, probably 1.2%.
Yes.
But the wheat, 0.6,
Flat.
0.5%.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on with that. All these other crops, including sorghum, have had tremendous yield increases. Wheat is the one that's dependent upon low input in public sector breeding that just, they don't receive the resources No, I think that's an excellent point.
Cater, could I ask a question?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that some of these results were from the high performance farmers.
Yes.
Um,
Well, these are all from the research directors.
But these are the research directors from commercial, traditional farming.
Right.
And some of those questions were driven by the organic market, where we heard that from organic farmers that they would like any option
Yes.
to help them control that meets the organic label. So I think their answers would be different
Yes,
than what
excellent
you got
point,
from the
Dan.
commercial.
Excellent point. Because a biological product is their best performing product because it's the only one.
The other point with wheat is it's among those crops, wheat is the only crop that's not on.
No, it won't amplify in the room. It's just for the recording.
Oh, okay, sorry. Wheat is the only crop that has direct human consumption,
Yes.
and that makes them very sensitive
Yes.
to consumer concerns, and that's also one reason you haven't seen GMO
Yes.
material. It's available, but it hasn't been marketed for precisely
Yeah.
that reason.
Yeah. No, an excellent point. Yes, a couple points here.
So I was going to say, I imagine that if you could have the biologicals on wheat, you could also get higher, you could sell it for more for the organic market. So maybe that's what they're thinking is if we could have something like that that was
Yeah.
effective or at least partially effective, we could get a lot more in return.
Yeah. No, good point.
Yeah, that's part of what I was going to point out. But the other thing is, as far as, I mean, I think no. I mean, performance is performance because you need to come out and say, I've got good stuff.
Right.
You should trust it. And I've got the data to back it up. The other thing about a lot of the biologicals is you see the performance that they're claiming and backed up by statistics is a lot of times off the charts. Like, you look at these and you say, really?
Yeah.
And so, but you don't get that. So what's Monsanto charging for a trait? And what can they say is reliable as far as field to field, year to year? And it seems to me that the biologicals are charging less than that, at least the numbers I've heard.
Right.
So I think there's a couple of things happening. One is, obviously, you have a bump because the biologicals were just, they're recent. You're finding the big effects. So now I would say, no, you need to charge something that the market will bear. But to me, in order to overcome the doubt of the witchcraft that goes on with it, is you say, no, I'm not going to charge as much as Monsanto or Bayer for a GMO product, which are probably going away anyway. But you need to charge enough. It's the consultant's dilemma. Do I charge
Yeah.
a little bit to get more business, or do I charge more to say, hey, I'm worth the money?
Right.
And it's obviously somewhere in between.
Yeah. No, these are all excellent points. Thank you.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Okay.
But thank you.
Okay. Let me go on to the next bit of information. We do producer surveys, and I've got 3 of them that will just briefly compare. The first one's going to be a priority survey. This was a survey we did last year with a lot of input, electronic survey for a bunch of objectives. Excellent response. Growers hate responding to surveys. This on average took 24 minutes. We had 10% of the U.S. cotton acreage respond to the survey. We gave them this lovely T-shirt on that. So we were real pleased with that response. And we had some questions in there designed to trick them and see if they were actually answering truthfully. I'm going to focus on the producer priorities. We had 2 obvious answers to see if they actually read the questionnaire. So let me just go into the results. So we asked the question 25, how would you rate the following cotton production concerns or challenges on your farm? And one of the trick questions was cotton production input cost. Every grower is going to tell you that's their number one concern. We did not have yield as an option here because that would have been a no-brainer. But 3% of the growers said it's not of an issue. I think 3% of the growers just didn't rate that at all. They just went and checked the first box or the last box. And these were all randomly presented in the survey. But the other trick question, we asked basically the same question twice. weed resistance to herbicides, and weed control. And again, these were all randomly presented, 25 issues, and you can see the numbers are virtually identical for these two concerns. So I feel that growers were honest in terms of reading it and responding it to based on that. But one of the key things I wanted to point out to you is this one right here, consumer attitudes about ag's impact on the environment. That came out of 7 out of 27, and the previous time it was right at the absolute bottom. So the sensitization of growers to their impact is growing hugely, because the question was, rate the following cotton production practices or challenges on your farm, not for society, not for your industry, but on your farm. So clearly some real sensitization there, Dan, that has an impact. Further on down, so these were the middle 10 out of the 27, couple that I point out. Lack of new crop protection products. When we did this in 2011, this ranked 7. We've had a lot of new products come on the marketplace, and so that's dropping. Insect resistance insecticides and BT cotton, that's moving up, and this was done in 15, in the spring of 15. As you know, 16 got even worse for BT resistance, so that's clearly an issue that's growers' top of mind, is the lack of performance or reduced performance on the GMO BT products in both corn and cotton. The other useful information we got out of that 2015 survey is we asked them where they get their technical information. And so this is so we gave them 4 options of generally selecting, generally or moderately, not at all, and minimal were the other 2. So these are the growers, present the growers so 80% of the growers said other producers were either greatly or moderately a source of good technical information. And so these are very straightforward, just like we heard from those research leads. Their neighbors, neighboring farmers are really important. Consultants, extension, here's ag business reps. Looking pretty good. A lot more emphasis on the technical people industries provide. Ag magazines, cotton organizations, field days, conferences, internet, email apps, way down toward the bottom. But look what has happened from 2008 to 2015, and I'll just highlight a couple of these here. So the blue is 2008, the 15 is the data you just saw. And you can see that the ag business reps are moving up and the ag magazines are moving down on that. Pretty solid trend. And likewise on the internet and emails, they're slowly moving up. So with this, I think this is very consistent with some of the information that we see about where growers get information. The bell cow growers, these other producers, that's so critically important. We all know who those are, and I'll show you some pictures of that. Just briefly on what works in terms of reaching producers, I wanted to mention that I've been educating growers and doing research for close to 40 years. We had meetings in Fresno County. It's the largest cotton county in the known world outside of Sinjan, and 450,000 acres of cotton. We had 2 growers show up for our big meeting. So the interest of growers to grow into these large meetings where they sit in uncomfortable chairs and are told things that they won't need for 6-7 months, like you learn in January what you need to do in September, that just doesn't cut it anymore. But what we're seeing growers are loving are these webinars where they can get information when they want it, when they need it, in the easiest possible package. And so we have partnered with American Phytopathological Society on this plant management network, and most of the major crops have these focus on corn and cotton. And this is we did analysis last December, so this data cuts off December 2015. We'll do it again. And so these are the date of releases of these various webcasts. We're doing 1 or 2 a month. And these are the total number of downloads. So these very new ones at the time didn't have as many downloads, obviously. But look at this. This is, 1,000, 2,000 downloads on that. And you can see where it comes from. 87% is the US. Growers are loving these things because you can look at one page. If you see something weird in your cotton field, you think it may be a fusarium, You can look at the 2 pages on diagnosis, and if you don't see anything that looks familiar, you can stop after 30 seconds of time investment. If it looks scary, like maybe what you saw, you can read more about it and spend 20 minutes. So it's a great, I love that. So let me close by how farmers make decisions, getting back to what Rana was talking about. Decisions are what's really important here, because you're creating data and you're creating products that have to fit into a farmer decision process. So we'll just close with that. They obviously gather current information. An extra cup of coffee for people that can call out the approximate location of these photos on that. So the growers tend to get very limited soil sites. This grower is actually pushing a probe into the field. He uses a rod just to see how deep the moisture's gone. He might do that in two locations in a 120-acre pivot. But extensive plant evaluations and observations. A lot of these growers, when you look at their crops, you're walking a mile through a field. You walk a long distance to really look at it, and they're extremely cognizant of the weather and the reliability of the weather. They also, so where was that? North of Lubbock, near Plainview. That's Petersburg. The farmers also take into account current information from other sources. Obviously, scouting reports from their consultants, extension tweets, these are getting really popular. A lot of particularly the entomologists and other pest management specialists in the state, they have simple tweet systems. Hey, I saw this insect in this county, might want to keep your eye on it, or this product has failed and we've had to respray a certain field over in this other county. That's getting more and more popular, and this is in the Mississippi Delta. Another component, as we've talked about, is they rely heavily on trusted sources. This is a farmer in Louisiana. And he is the respected neighbor on that by just about every farmer in the Delta. It's Jay Hardwick. Also technical experts, as we've talked about, long-term relationships with those people, and hopefully the focus on cotton that we put out there, they're utilizing. A very critical part that we were talking about last night with Dr. Woodward about farmers making decisions is they rely very heavily on what's worked or failed in the past, and what's worked and failed for their father, maybe their grandfather, maybe their cousin that's farming, and so they very much put things in context. And if it's out of the bounds, then they need some real strong evidence to show that that's a decision, a risk worth taking. And often it's a family decision, and sometimes it's a straightforward relationship with a spouse or a father and a son, but sometimes, like the gentleman I showed from Louisiana, Jay Hardwick, he's dealing with ownership of 20 people, and he's the only one on the farm. Everyone else is living in Chicago or New York or Los Angeles, and they have no connection to the farm other than coming together for a big family barbecue once a year on the farm. And so those are very difficult decisions that he has to make about anything. And probably the most important thing that a farmer uses to make decisions is the hardcore economics. Any farmer that's alive today and farming is a good businessman, otherwise they've gone bankrupt and someone else is farming that land because of the commodity prices, the fluctuations, stating to inefficient farmers. And so they look at where are they spending their money, and what are the big drivers. These are all ranked for, this is a West Texas irrigated field based on the Texas A&M data. And I'll just leave you with this slide. Right now we have a lot of grower interest in biologicals, and a lot of it's being driven by soil health and NRCS and all the visibility of the human microbiome and the gut microbiome and the parallels. And these were two great Nature articles that make that perfect analogy as what's going on in the gut. Perfectly matches all the way with what farmers would like to do in the field. So if you can do this, You've got a wonderful product. This is 28 years of continuous corn rotation, no-till versus tilled annually in Florence, South Carolina. And growers would love to be able to get to this kind of soil versus something like that in less than 28 years. So biological products may have a real clue on that. With that, Dan, let me close, and I'll be around all day if you have any other questions or comments. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Cater? We have a couple questions.
Yes.
So first, let me apologize to, I know there's people from Monsanto here, and I didn't mean to pick on y'all. I can pick on Syngenta if you prefer. Just your, big ag. So it goes in with, Cater, what you're talking about at the end, how does a farmer make a decision? And I'm going to make the argument that given the tendency towards big data and the fact that we are all wanting more data, we live in a data-rich world, but the difference, so it's easier, I think, for a farmer to make a decision on that than it is to come over to the things that Dan was talking about and say, here, I got a data set of 20 points. And so I'm kind of seeing, here we are, it's kind of, I don't know what the term is, but we're talking about small data now today in a big data world. And I'm going to just make the argument that part of what's going on is that we're looking at different things along the value chain. The small data decisions are things, how do you decide whether I'm going to start a new, do an experiment down the road? Am I going to commit to testing something? As we know, it's better to fail early, so
right.
How do you screen things out? So I think the juxtaposition of it is very interesting. And I'm also going to say that with the big data and the kinds of inputs that we're getting, whether, how many companies are out there now saying we can help interpret your data, precision agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. We're all comfortable with that. But I think we're really not comfortable with having how to do it with a small data set. And I've just put it out to everybody. What would convince you if I came to you with a 20-point data experiment and I want to get you to see things my way? What would it take to convince you to spend more time on that, to do another experiment instead of you saying, oh, no, that's fine, show me more data. But what data do you want?
Your comments on big data are spot on. Most of the farmers I deal with, they're dealing with 100 fields or more. And so they are the embodiment of big data. And the only thing I'd add to what you say, because I agree with it all, is that the parallels between human microbiomes and soil microbiomes are perfectly parallel with big data as well. The privacy issues that we deal with assembling, 1 million human genomes and utilizing that are the same privacy issues. So, and again, Nature's had some wonderful articles talking about the parallels between big data as regards to medicine and agriculture. And the reason I harp on that is obviously the amount of money that goes into medical research is 10 to 20 times what goes into agriculture research. And so we can look into the future on agriculture technology by looking at what's cutting edge in medical right now and how they solve the privacy issues, the data utilization issues, those kind of things are going to really help us. So I'm glad that you guys are thinking about that.
If you would kind of flip back to the Louisiana farmer, I'd just like to point out something that people may not have noticed. Yes, look on the field. He is already ahead of the curve by using a cover crop.
Yes.
He has planted into rye that looks
Yes.
like cereal rye.
Yeah.
Just wanted to point that out.
And this one here too, this is West Texas, so they don't use as much water for the cover crop. But he does have some dry land, which is really unusual, dry land with cover crops on that. But let's see, I think I may have had, this one too. These are just barely cotton plants. This is a grower in the Missouri Boot Hill. and he has been using no-till for quite a long time. He's just starting to implant cover crops, and his neighbors drove by that and said, "My God, I'm going to be farming this land next year," and he's whistling all the way to the bank. You walk out in the field, and it was a gorgeous, gorgeous field. So you're right, a huge interest in growers with not just no-till, but going the next step with cover crops.
And particularly in the southeast, that's the key. You can't have one without.
Right. Yeah. No, excellent point. Thank you. Yes.
How do you think farmers take data from third-party trialers versus university-run trials? Because I don't know as many, for example, biologicals trials being done by university, let's say on cotton,
Right.
versus having companies have to do it through third-party trialers. So how is that acceptable through farmers' eyes versus a university-based
Right. Excellent
trial?
question. They don't trust small plot data even by a university person, not because of the objectivity, but because they know that the small plots, they often report yields that are 20 to 50% higher because they have the edge effects. They don't, the edge plant yields 3 times what a plant further into the plot yields. So they're unrealistic yields. We find, in fact, growers are asking me to put more and more money into performance evaluations done in the public sector, large plot, and particularly things that really make money for them, such as variety selection. Variety selection, we're spending 2 cents per acre in the U.S., and I've just recently done the math on it. We're getting $25 back in value to the grower by helping him select the absolute best variety as close as we can on every single field. And the growers at this point, they're very skeptical. I apologize to my Monsanto friends and Syngenta and DuPont and Bayer and Dow friends, but they really want some high quality, objective university evaluation of critical inputs such as varieties. Now, how that relates to biologicals, I don't know. All that.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
This was wonderful. I think having that perspective of the ultimate user of our products, it was really, really helpful.